Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Crosby Kemper. I'm the director of the Kansas City Public Library and a permanent mentee of Barnett Helzberg. I want to start off by thanking Laura Laban, who is next to me, for the food. The Culinary Center of Kansas City has donated the food. Thank you, Laura. I particularly want to thank her for the hemp brownies, because obviously this is a much happier audience than we normally have, and I just want you all to, if you need a designated driver, let me know.
Boxes of Triscuits for everybody later.
Boxes of Triscuits for everybody later, okay. They'll bring you down, I guess. And Alice B. Toklas, eat your heart out. But, and also I want to thank Danny O'Neill. I don't know if Danny is here tonight. Danny here? No.
Out of town.
Danny's out of town, but he donated the coffee. And Dan, as many of you know, we have an entrepreneurship series, Kansas City of Cradle of Entrepreneurs, that we've been doing, and we did one of them with Danny. We've done one with John McDonald of Boulevard Brewing, and many others. And I know that there are some future entrepreneurs who have been cradled in Kansas City or cradled in hemp who will be a part of that program. But tonight we're going to talk about the success of the hemp program, the Helzberg Entrepreneurship Mentoring Program. And this is an idea of Barnett Helzberg's, and I want to introduce Barnett, who I know these days is known mainly as Shirley Helzberg's escort. But there is a rumor around. Originally, we were going to do this upstairs in the Helzberg auditorium, but Warren Buffett called me and he said Barnett has outgrown Helzberg's, Helzberg Auditorium, Helzberg Diamonds, and I do want to squash the rumor that Barnett was actually named after the Helzberg Auditorium. It is the other way around, and Shirley was not named after the other Helzberg Auditorium at the Kaufman Center. That was named, anyway, we won't go into that. But I just want to clear all that up. But I want to start out with Barnett, and I want to ask him a little bit about his own entrepreneurial story. It is a little known fact that he started out when he was 11 years old in business. His father set him up with a stand at 55th and Ward Parkway selling zircons. Is that right? I mean, some kids sell lemonade, but Barnett, really, you did start out pretty young working for the family business, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Actually, it was very awkward for me. I was at 1100 Walnut. I was a runner, which meant I took the merchandise and walked the customer down to the basement, lower level, credit department. And I don't know why, but I was a very timid kid, and I felt that was really awkward, but I did it.
And you've remained, obviously, a very timid guy through most of your life, as obviously there are a lot of your friends here tonight who know that, and who wish you well, given that problem. But your father actually has, and we want to talk mainly about hemp, and we want to get the stories, these four great stories out tonight. But I do think the Helzberg story itself is a great story, and your father has a great story of having started at the age of 14. He actually took over the company, didn't he?
His dad had a stroke, and he actually ended up quitting school and running the store. One brother was in the war, one brother was in dental school, and two sisters, one of whom would have been a great retailer, but you didn't have girls running things then, and Elsie was fabulous. But so he took over, and he loved it. Every month, and I mean, he was amazing. And he was so amazingly courageous. I mean, he broke every rule. Some people remember Certified Perfect Diamonds. We were the highest price because every diamond solitaire had to be perfect. And all people knew was the weight of a diamond. So we were higher priced than anybody. And that's all we sold. We wouldn't allow any others. And he wouldn't negotiate prices. He broke some of the rules, a lot of the basic rules, and loved it and succeeded.
And so you took over the business, there's one part of the Helzberg story, or there are two parts of the Helzberg story that I want you to tell because I think they relate to what happens in hemp and the success stories that we're about to hear. And the first part is actually your failure in Helzberg's, the downtown stores. You kept the downtown stores when the malls started. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I made some, you can always look back at your bad decisions. This is one of the worst. One of the first covered malls in America was Ward Parkway Shopping Center, Kansas City, Missouri. We had a lease there, and we were very smart. We had a clause that if they didn't build it within 2 years, it was a Crow Brothers project, and if we didn't build it within 2 years, if they didn't build it, we could get out. And frankly, my dad was ill, and we didn't talk things out. I mean, I've learned so much. I always wish that I was a mentee and I was when these people could have taught me. But anyway, we pulled out. And then we go back when we wake up years later, and I go to these landlords, and they look at me and they say, "Who needs you?" We got 2 stores from Zale and Bailey Banks in Middle. We got 2 stores from Gordon's and Mermod Jacker King. We don't need you. So I learned a lot. We had to show them why they needed us. And the way we did it finally, we were double the average volume, and you paid a percentage rent. So if they got double the rent, all of a sudden we're good looking, like these girls. By the way, we pick everybody on merit, not on beauty. I know I've been accused, but no, it's merit. So,
well, and then the other part of the story I want to talk about is the I Am Loved, because you did this incredible turnaround where, if I understand correctly, you closed 38 of your 39 downtown stores, the old stores, but eventually opened 143 before you sold to Warren Buffett, and stores in other places, in the shopping centers, et cetera. But you created this program that you became known for nationally, the I Am Loved program. Talk about that for a second.
That was kind of a serendip. Keep in mind when I tell you this story, everything, boy, that was great. I think a 12-year-old kid created Mr. Peanut, so don't think it's that big a deal. But anyway, I'm walking on air, and I always loved advertising, and I'm home, and I write up this ad, and it says, "Give her a button or a diamond. A button is free. A diamond's $50,000 to $5,000. And frankly, the first thing I did, I thought it's too embarrassing. I threw it in the wastebasket. Well, fortunately, I fished it out and took it into Mr. Claude Burke, who was with our company about 38 years, fabulous artist. And, kind of snuck it in. "Mr. Burke, what do you think?" And he says, "I like it." I go to my brother, Charlie, and he says, "We got to try this in some markets. This is really good." Then I go to my dad, and this was my dad, because this is so interesting, because he would back you. He said, "I don't like it." This is 1967. He says, "It'll fill the stores with hippies." But he says, "If you're going to do it right." So he wasn't a control guy, and very unusual. His dream was, he says, "I hope people say, well, the old man had something to do with that business." I mean, he was really unusual. So we happen to have the great artist, a terrific copywriter. We bought, what do? You've never done anything like this. You don't know what you're doing. Buy 50,000 buttons, and there was a threatened strike of sign painters. So we painted, it was called Signboard Hill, where Crown Center is at that time. And we painted it Friday because there was supposed to be a strike threatened. We're almost out of buttons. And then we flew over the football game. It just said, "I am loved." And I mean, the thing was nuts. It just went wild, and it was just so much fun. And it was a 1-month program. That's all it was. It was November '67. And needless to say, and of course we're going nuts. I mean, the first Father's Day, the first I Am Loved Mother's Day, we sold golf balls. I thought we were going to start making cars. I love cars. I mean, I was going nuts. But anyway, it was and one of my favorites, and I took a picture. There was actually it was a pawn shop on 39th and Main, and it had a picture. It's handwritten. It said, "We don't waste your money on buttons," and it had a picture. We got low prices. But it drove people nuts, and the other jewelers tried to copy it. I mean, it was just one of those pieces of luck.
And then to crown your success and to prove that you really were loved, you bumped into Warren Buffett in an unusual place.
59th Street, the Plaza Hotel, and I went up and introduced myself, and I said, "We have a company that fits your." I was, I don't know, 61, whatever it was, whenever, 95, and he said, "Well, send me the information. It'll be confidential." Well, I went. The whole long deal. I went home. I didn't send him anything. Then I read his annual report. It said, if you fit, send the information. So I finally look in the mirror and I think, he gave it verbally. He gave it in writing. It's going to be confidential. So of course I mailed it myself. No secretary, none of that, and get a call. So I don't know. Too good to be true.
It's an amazing story, and I go to New York regularly. My wife has an apartment in New York, and I go to Fifth Avenue and 58, and I hang out there.
Well, let me know next time.
Nothing happing, Barnett.
Just let
nothing
me know
happens.
when you're going.
I have this library I'm willing to sell, and nothing happens. But anyway. Well, okay, so you sold Helzberg, and you have nothing to do now, and so you have the idea for hemp. How does that idea come to you? What do you?
I don't. Well, a few years before, when I thanked Mr. Kaufman for helping me, he says, "That's okay. You'll help somebody someday." So I thought of this thing, and I went. And if I have this problem. I just got to talk to everybody in the world about everything. So I got to. What do you think? The SBA, really nice man there, and almost everybody thought it was good, except where's Chuck Kaufman? He told me it wouldn't work.
There he is.
Yeah, we fish, and of course he told me all fishing every time we go fishing. And Morton Soslin also, you know him. And Paul Hansen called my wife and says, "You know how big this could be?" He thought it was great. But anyway, so most of them patting me on the head. This is great. I write all these people. I'm really planting seeds. I'm going to ask them to be mentors. And so then I have lunch with Rich Davis, Bill French, and Bill Eddy from UMKC, and they said, "We want you to chair this gala." And I said, "Yeah, that's not my deal. I can't do those things." And so they said, "Well, maybe you could start a mentoring program." So I went home and I look in the mirror. I think, okay, put up or shut up. Either quit thinking about it and quit bothering people, or do it. So we did it. And we had a meeting in my basement in '95, and we're off and running. And there was all magic in the air that day. It was obvious.
The true basement startup. This is a lesson. Yes.
It was
it's
magic.
Like Ewan Kaufman in his garage.
Right.
And so you got some great people involved in it, like the people you've mentioned, Henry Block, Barney Carbank, et cetera, some people who could be great mentors and have been great mentors. But there were some rules, some qualifications, which I think is a good lead-in to actually hearing some of these great stories. You didn't want startups.
Right.
And why didn't you want startups?
Well, it's so amazing, the little things in life. I hadn't really thought it out that well, and I was at a meeting at UMKC sitting next to Kurt Mueller, who was the head of entrepreneurs at Kaufman, and we're just talking, and we're barely started or talking about it. And he looked, I hadn't thought it out. And what do I know about startups? What do I know about entrepreneurship? Anyway, and he says, "You don't want startups." I said, "My God, you're right." I mean, homogeneity, the commonality, and of course he was right. And so more and more we focused on who we serve and who we don't. We have a saying, if you want to be everything to everybody, you ain't nothing to nobody. So it's not that we're snobs, but we got to focus on a market. So that's...
And so you have companies that have $1 million in sales. If I understand, you got to have $1 million in sales, 5 employees. Integrity is very important. The integrity of the people that you're dealing with.
Inside and outside the business.
Inside and outside the business. Open to new ideas.
Interested in growth.
And growth.
And when we started, we took a restaurant with one restaurant that you want. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not our niche. So it's pretty high growth companies. James is an example. I mean, he really wants to grow. He was a perfect prospect for us. And these other folks have really grown their businesses. So growth, that's almost everything.
And well, no, there's one other which is really interesting because it's sort of the outlier in a way, a willingness to help others, which I find very interesting, and which is true of all 4 of the people who are up here and most of the stories in this book. But why? What relates that to growing a business? Willingness to help others. Is it customer orientation? Is it trust? Is it what is the?
I don't know. I will tell you one thing. What I really think it comes down to, and we've had some wonderful resources. Some of my closest friends from New York. They were first I invited them, and then the Hampers won them back over and over. Ted and Alice Cohn. And when they came out for one of these, they said, this couldn't happen in New York. A lot of that relates to Midwesterners, I think to Kansas City, a little prejudiced, but I think that's a lot of the ethic here. But these are just that kind of people. They're giving people, and they're open. And the unusual thing that I've been told by some of the mentees, the really unusual thing we've got is, instead of saying we had the biggest sales, we did this, we did that, we have a thing, put your worst foot forward. We cannot help you. Absolute confidentiality, that's a major deal. And put your worst foot forward. So we can help you.
Well, and now I want to get into some of the stories of the 4 mentees of Hemp, the 4 businesses, and the 4 entrepreneurs we've got here. And Laura Lee, if I could start with you. Yes. And ask you this question. So Barnett's just talked about the worst foot forward. In a way, your success is related to maybe what must have been one of the worst moments in your life when you were working for a guy in a marketing business. You've been very successful for him, and he gave you a contract saying, sign this non-compete contract. You'll never compete with him or you'll be fired. And what did you do?
Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock, after I'd worked for this company for about 10 years, I was offered the opportunity to walk out the door. I was escorted out of the building. My computer, everything was locked down. And I had been running that company for 10 years. And I went home, and I cried all night long. I've never been fired. I'm always on the A team. And my husband said, compete. And I said, I don't know how to do this. He said, you've been doing it for 10 years. So within a few days, I had a logo and a company name, Lion's Share, and I vowed I would take the lion's share of the business away, and I didn't sign the contract, and that was in '95, so it's good.
And here you are. And there's one story from your youth that I'd love to tell, because you obviously are a person who needs to be the ringmaster. So you know what I'm going for here. There's a story in the book about how you created the backyard circus. So
I remember at a very early age standing on one of those electrical spools. My grandfather worked for the telephone company, and standing on top of it and guiding all of the neighbor children and their animals in the circus. And I remember standing on that stool and the spool and thinking, oh, this is a good job for me, directing the circus. So I clear as a bell. I remember that.
So running a business is a little bit like directing a circus.
It is.
I tell you that from experience at the library and at the bank. But running a circus, controlling the 3 rings, et cetera. Having control is very important. And Barnett tells a great story about his father saying to him, I think I'm getting this right. Tell me if I'm wrong. That you just deal with the things that you can control. But then there's a moment that came for you, which is when you turned to hemp, when you didn't think you could control things, that the balance of your work life and your home life was pretty tough.
Too many circles to watch. So you have to find people that you trust to run some of those rings. And that was very challenging for me because I'm a control freak. So I'm an admitted control freak. So that was very challenging. So I found, with the help of hemp, team leaders in my company that were also equally controlling and gave them their own rings to control.
And that seems to me, and I think this is true for all of your colleagues up here, one of the things that you learn through this mentoring process at Hemp is that at some moment as you grow the business, you have to give up some control and you have to learn to delegate. I mean, it strikes me, and Barnett, James, Laura, Andy, jump in on this, but finding people you can delegate to is one of the keys to success and growth. Is that right?
I agree with that.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment about that, James?
Well, actually, I agree with that too as well. I mean, I am a control freak as well. Real bad, first degree. And I think that what it is that it's hard to let go. And I have lately let go. Sometimes. And I'm working on that seriously. I'm really working on that. So I'm getting there. So,
well, one of the things about hemp, and again, I'd love for any of you to comment, and Barnett to talk about that too. One of the things that makes hemp such a successful mentoring program, it seems to me, is that it's created a culture in which trust is very important. The trust of the mentors and the mentees, and the social grouping of what happens. And Laura and I were talking about that. Can we pass this along?
Right there.
Oh, sorry, we got two of them. Great. Okay, Laura, you're in a very social business. You're cooking and cooking classes, et cetera. The Culinary Center of Kansas City. Tell us your story a little bit. Why did you turn to hemp? What was the key moment for you?
Well, it was mainly for me about the fact that I practiced law for a long time, and I was always the one that people came to for the answers. And whenever I jumped off the edge and followed my heart, I quickly discovered I did not have all the answers, especially in small business. And it was really a place for me. I wanted to give all the boards I was on and everything, get rid of all those, and I wanted to be the student, and I wanted to learn. That's kind of how I started.
But at the same time, you were, as a child, I love the stories of you all as children. What really drove you. You cooked every recipe. You made every recipe in the Betty Crocker cookbook.
I did the children's.
That's a little obsessive compulsive.
Yes, front to back, front to back. I still have it sitting on my desk as a reminder of following your heart. Because sometimes, I went off in this other direction. I'm not sorry at all that I went into the legal field because I really enjoyed that as well. But whenever I got to the point in my where I was trying to make a decision about what I wanted to do and which direction, I kept going back to the fact that I, did that with the cookbook, but also that I sat. Some of my happiest times were when I was sitting on the counter, making pies with my grandma, and I use that story a lot. But I was so little that my feet, were up on the counter, and I was cooking with her. That's what was in my heart, so I built a business around it.
Your need to make something yourself, obviously, is very important.
Yeah. And to this day, I still teach all the pie classes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And so the success moment comes. There's a Kansas City Star article about what you're doing. You start the Culinary Center, and there's an article, and the phone calls come in, and the business takes off. And
it was one of those times when I had to say to myself, and I said it over and over, I don't want to wake up and be done with my life or near the end and say that I had this really great idea I wish I would have. And I always like to describe an entrepreneur as somebody who has these certain cells in them, and the cells are this. We're more afraid of not trying than we are of failing. And that's really the definition of an entrepreneur to me.
Yeah, that's a great definition. But you reach a moment when you've grown a lot and you've got a lot going on and you need help, and you turn to hemp. What inspired you to turn to hemp?
Mary Lou Jacoby.
Hi, Mary Lou.
She basically referred me, and when I found out about it, I was all in. And it's been, it took me a while to get to the point where I really felt comfortable enough to ask the questions, and that's what we tell the mentees a lot of times is don't be afraid to ask. That's probably the biggest hurdle, because they think that people don't want to help, or they don't have time, or they're not as important. And Barnett drives that home almost every event that we have, especially with the new mentees.
Great. And your mentors, Mike O'Malley and then Grant Burcham, what did they teach you to do? What was the important thing that you learned from them?
I watched how they did business, and I learned. They were very generous with their time. They stopped everything. In particular, Grant Burcham, at a time when I was at one of my lowest, I called Grant, and within 30 minutes, he had me in his office, and he had a group of people, and he had a plan for me, literally within 30 minutes. He was right there. Mainly because I had developed a relationship with him.
Right.
You talked about the relationships earlier, and you were talking about my business. I think part of what my business is all about is understanding how people relate to each other and creating those scenarios where they do, whether it be in a cooking class or a team building or a private event of some kind. And so to me, that's what my business was built on, what happens around the table or in front of the table or in the kitchen or near it. And that's kind of what hemp is. It's what happens around, a cocktail hour, or what happens before and after a meeting. To me, that is the essence of hemp. It's those building of relationships.
There's a culture to hemp, which builds a culture for the individual
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to give you the definition of confidentiality and what it means. And they hear this ad nauseum every time we have a lunch or a meeting, and Ray Pittman kind of wrote this in stone for us. Confidentiality means when James tells me about his business, it doesn't mean I can share it with a hemper. I can't share it with anybody unless James says, you can go ahead and talk to Laura Lee about it. But that's what confidentiality means, and that I'm sure has helped. Basically, I don't know of leaks we've had, which is pretty amazing. But it's emphasized and re-emphasized to create the comfort to say, I was really a dummy. This is really stupid. What do I do? Or whatever.
Barnett, if you don't mind, I was thinking about this today because people think this is a cult. And what I say is, and it is, but it is not really, it's not a secret society. But it is a group of people, it is a society that really understands and honors confidentiality, which is not the same thing as a secret.
You have to have people you can trust as your mentors. And James, can we talk about your business and your dreams? You also started very, very young as an entrepreneur, doing something that maybe a lot of people in the audience have done, mowing lawns and doing stuff like that. But you dreamt big, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When I was a kid, I started a little lawn service. I used to rake the leaves, shovel the snow, also cut the grass. And then for a while there, I just kind of started hiring some little kids in the neighborhood to do it for me. And then I kind of built it up. I think I had like maybe 7 to 8 customers. And we took care of the customers. And we made sure, and on the way from home from school, I remember picking up the trash when I was coming home and out of the yard because I wanted to make sure I took care of that lawn looked nice. And I kind of did that as a young man. And I kind of built it up. I always wanted to do something in business, and I did.
And you're an early believer in diversification. You went from lawn mowing to snow plowing.
That's right. I'm doing that today.
Yeah.
I do the same thing today.
Not
do
actually
more than one.
Today.
Yeah, but I'm not.
Today would be the
yeah. I'm talking about
watering
I did different business. Right.
And so you built then as an adult after being in the Army and coming out of that a cleaning and safety supply business.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And why did you turn to hemp? What was the inspiration for turning to hemp for you?
Well, actually, a friend of mine, she told me about hemp, and I said, well, I didn't know what hemp was. I had a different terminology with hemp, and I said, well, maybe I might not want to do that, So but I kind of got into it, and I tell you, it's really inspiring to me to be able to do something like this. It gives me a positive attitude because I didn't know you get a chance to speak to folks who do the same thing that you do, and I think that's very imperative in this, in this business world to do the same thing. I get to talk to Randy. I mean, anybody, anything what they're doing, and I get a chance to hear their stories, and I think that's what makes me. I enjoy being in hemp.
And what have you learned at hemp? I mean, obviously from the very beginning, just from what you said about picking up the trash, and you bought a general store at one place at one time.
I built a store, right? I kind of built with $200. I started it.
And in the book, it talks about you giving credit, selling bus tokens, and offering nachos dipped in cheese.
That's right.
And you said you're quoted as saying, "I was selling customer service."
That's right.
So obviously you believe in that. So and that's a core of what you are and what you do. But what did hemp add to that? What did you need from hemp to take you to the next level?
Well, what I need from him to take to the next level is to be able to have the knowledge that some things I was missing. I mean, I always have, when I built the business up, I started a business for maybe $500 or $200, $1,000, and I would start that business, and it would eventually grow to either $500 to $1 million, and I would sell it, and I would rest for a couple of months. And I was content. So when I got into the industrial supply business I am in now, I decided, well, I'm going to keep this. And it's diversified. I'm doing janitorial paper. I'm doing fruit. We're doing all kind of things.
Lessons learned when you were 11,
absolutely.
yes.
That's right. So I decided I need to get to the next level. And that's what a friend told me about hemp. And then that's how I kind of started from that point on.
Okay, great.
They said they can inspire you.
And Andy, can we talk about your business? You started out in other businesses, working for bigger companies, Exxon, I think.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
And so going from Exxon to starting your own very small custom home company, that's a huge leap. What led you to do that?
Well, I had a epiphany at one moment, and it came as I worked at Exxon. I always, when I grew up, I got good grades. I worked hard. I thought you would then get a corporate job. You'd work hard. You get the gold watch, and you retire, and everything would be good. And so I was at Exxon, and one of my kind of a mentor at Exxon, I guess, called me up one day and said, "Hey, Andy, would it be okay if I came over to your house to talk to you about a business proposition?" And I said. And this was like Michael Jordan asking if he wanted to come over and shoot free throws. And so this guy was way up above, and I wanted to be him. I knew he was going to be CEO of Exxon one day. His name was Ben Mazzetta, actually. And so he invited me, so he came over, we got the china out, we got everything all fancy. And this is a big deal, and I was ready for how he was going to tell me to get, higher level of Exxon. And he said, turned out he was selling Amway. And Amway. Now, nothing against Amway, but it just, I said, Ben, what are you doing? I want to be you. You're going to be CEO of Exxon. I mean, I'm going to follow your path. I mean, what's up? And he said, well, I've met all the people above me, and I kind of see what it takes to climb the corporate ladder. And he said, I just don't want to do it anymore. He said, I want to be my own boss. And he said, all I know how to do is to manage people at Exxon. And you can't really do that on the street. You can't start a company managing other, middle managers. And so he said, I don't really have any other skills. I don't really know what I want to do, so I'm doing this. Well, I didn't end up selling Amway, but it did blow the blinders off. I suddenly started looking around, and I said, what do I want to do with my life? And I thought, wow, when I die, do I want to say, well, I made an awful lot of gasoline? And I said, no, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I said, no, that's not what I want to do. And then I thought about it, and I had grown up as a son of a carpenter. My brother and I had both built with our hands virtually everything with my dad, who was very old school. And so
you say in the book that he gave you all the toughest jobs to discourage you from going into business for yourself.
I was working 8-hour days at child labor laws would have never worked with my dad. 8, 10, 9 years old, we were working 8 hours a day, brutal work, and he'd give us all the worst jobs. And he'd tell my brother and I, remember this, boys, so you get a good education and you get the hell out of the construction business. That was the exact quote. So we got both my brother and I got a good education, but then I realized that that's really what I enjoyed doing. I knew that I wanted to build things, and so then I started looking around, and shoot, I didn't last very long. I had another 6 months to go to get vested, where you get your IRAs and everything at Exxon. I couldn't take it. The clock was just ticking too slow on the wall, and so I left about a month later, and it was the best thing I ever did. And I'm just glad that Ben called me up that one day to sell
and so
Amway to
you
me.
started your construction business, and we know in recent years construction's been a little up and down, a little. But so it might seem obvious why you turned to hemp, except your story about why you turned to hemp, it was how should we say, completely venal? Can we say can we say this? You turned to hemp because you didn't want to talk to Barnett.
Right. Barnett was the middleman.
Barnett was the middleman. You wanted to get to.
I wanted to get to Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. And so you figured out how to get to Warren.
I did. And that's a whole other story. But I have a very very big idea that I'm still cultivating right now. That was another epiphany that occurred on July 24, 2004. But that's a whole other story. But eventually I wanted to get to Warren Buffett, and so I think big. And so I got to John Dillingham Jr. At one point in time. And great guy, wonderful guy. And so I showed him the project, and he just said, wow, this is great. And I said, well, John, I know this is kind of a bizarre question, but do you have any idea how to get to Warren Buffett? And he kind of laughed, and he said, actually, I do. I know this guy who just sold his company to Warren Buffett. His name's Barnett Helzberg. And I said, oh, John, that's great. So can you give me his phone number? And then, let me call him, and you can introduce me. And he said, no. And I said, what? Why? Can you not give it to me? He goes, no, I can. But he said, Barnett Helzberg will appreciate it if you can figure out how to get to him without me. And I said, okay, all right. And so a little smile on his face when he told me that. And so I Googled Barnett Helzberg, and up popped Helzberg Entrepreneurial Mentorship Program. And so I thought, well, heck, this is a case of where I didn't know that I needed help. And so I said, well, heck, I bet I can get Barnett to come to my house if I do this deal. So the terrible ulterior motives. So then I sure enough, I filled out the application. I happened to meet the criteria and didn't really think much about the construction company because I thought, well, heck, I'm doing fine. Everything's okay. And so Barnett literally came to the house with the 8 people in the limo, and they all came over, and I showed them, I skipped the whole construction company, I showed them the big project. And I think Lyril Holt, I don't know if he's here or not, but I think he said something like, well, hell, he's an entrepreneur. Yeah, he's in. So anyway, then I got into the program kind of through dubious means, and then I got hooked up with, I thought, well, as long as I'm here, I might as well, get into this. And I got hooked up with Ted Murray, my mentor, who's a fantastic guy. And that's when I found out that I didn't know all these things. And I had been working like crazy for a lot of years, about 8 years, but I was really just spinning the wheels like a hamster in a wheel. I was working like crazy. And I thought, well, I'm a pretty smart guy. If I just work hard, it'll eventually come together. But it wasn't. And Ted, at the first lunch we had, he looked at my, what I had, and he goes, oh my gosh, we got a lot of work to do. And so, and it gave me great accountability because we meet once a month. In fact, we still meet once a month. I graduated, Laura Lee are in the same pledge class several years ago. Is that right? And we still have lunch once a month now. But Ted is the one that, and through Barnett, we just had lunch with the big guy today, and we have lots of other events where the Helzberg program has been phenomenal. And really, we jumped 330% while the construction industry was tanking. That was 2009. It was our biggest year.
One of the key things Ted said to you was to treat your business like a company. Is that right?
That's the biggest thing. And actually, Barnett directly told me to get this book, E-Myth. E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And Barnett, I think, scolded me because we were having lunch. And he said, you haven't read that book? You need to read that now. And when Barnett tells me anything, I go do it right now. Hence why I'm here. And so, Barnett asked, I'm going to be there. So I got the book and read it, and it's phenomenal. And it's the whole story, I think, you could summarize hemp. It's working on the business and not in the business is the big thing. And I had been desperately working in the business, and when I started thinking about it differently, it allowed us to then really get to the next level, and I really owe all of that to him.
One of the things that you talk about in the book is actually getting an office and how important that was. You were doing everything out of your house?
That was big. I was a slow grower, and so I had an opportunity to bid on a church, like a $3 million church, and the pastor had seen or the head of the building committee saw the address and showed up. Well, I hadn't yet moved out. I thought, well, I liked working from home and whatnot, and I had a little 3-year-old running around in diapers and a dog barking in the background, and the head of the building committee opens the door and hands me the plans, and I saw the look in his eye, and I knew that it was all over. And sure enough, it was. And I told that story to Ted, and he said, "That's time. Let's go." And so we moved in, and we've now moved again, and that has really elevated our credibility significantly from a pretty small operation to now a much kind of bigger operation, and we're really a company now instead of creating a job for myself, I guess you'd say.
Well, I want to go back to something you mentioned, which is also about the culture of hemp, and that is the lunch with the big guy.
That's right.
That's actually a phrase that has its own little symbol in the book. Lunch with the big guy. What's lunch with the big guy?
Those are great. That is when I don't know, anywhere from 6 to 10 hempers get together, and Barnett usually buys, and we we go to lunch, and it's the confidentiality thing is we talk about it right at the front, and it's awesome because, again, everybody talks about what they need help with. Nobody's there to pat each other in the back and say, "Oh, you're doing so great." It's like, forget all that. Okay, what do you need help with? And then each person goes around the room, fellow hempers, and they talk about what it is, and then the others, including Barnett, will then offer suggestions on what to do. And that's a heck of a brain trust to have at basically, no cost. It's kind of free consulting where you get these great minds that are really eager to help you because they've been helped. And that whole culture of helping others just keeps going on. Everybody's eager to jump in, and I've gotten some phenomenal ideas out of those lunches.
Can I say a couple? Number one, I never pay for those lunches. One of our members...
In the beginning he did. I know he did.
He was so successful.
Jim Stokey, one of our members, a few years ago, he said, "I want to sponsor the lunch." Ever since then, we got people lined up to sponsor these lunches, and what they are is usually at the member's place of business. But if that doesn't work, we have an office at 2000 Mall. The other thing, and we're saying hemp, 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 I want to tell you the purpose of the book, at least one purpose, is to spread the gospel that people will help. Not that you have to be a hemper, but that people will help other people, and to encourage people to get a mentor. So it's not you have to be a member of any particular group. It's the point that people will help, whether it's Henry Block or Grant Burcham or whoever it is. People will help and love doing it and enjoy it and find great enrichment. And so I think Ray, I don't know, you have 6 mentees now, or he's the king of the mentors. But Ray will tell you it's been one of the most enriching things of his life. And he threw the Japanese under and all that stuff. But, it's very enriching. But it's not hemp. We keep saying hemp. It's not hemp. It's proselytizing that these people want to help, they're available. And that's what we hope to spread around. And we hope to go to the colleges teaching entrepreneurship. So I just want to make that clear.
Maybe that's where the part that seems so unusual in your 5 qualifications for entering the program, the helping others, because that's what the mentors get out of this. And to be a good mentee, you probably have to have the same kind of, you have to be able to build that relationship and understand what the mentors are getting out of it, and maybe ultimately be in a position to be a mentor yourself, ultimately.
Right, that's where we get them.
Yeah. Any of our panelists like to, I'd love to hear any more stories about the mentors and what they brought to you, if anyone has, yeah, would you like to?
The first time that I met with Mike O'Malley, at the end of the conversation, he said, the next time we meet, I have a surprise, but you can't see it for at least 5 years. And I'm, okay. So the next time we meet, he has an envelope, and it is sealed, and he said, I wrote down where you would be in 5 years. And he sealed it, and I didn't have it. So 5 years later, we opened it up together, and he was pretty much right on the money. That was amazing. And that was after one meeting, and, you know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great story. So, Barnett, I need to ask you a question. You built a very big company, so you don't really qualify for hemp.
That's what my son tells me.
Yeah, your son says you don't qualify, except you're
well, the
you're
only way I could get in was starting it.
Right.
That was the only way.
Okay, but I understand that you now have an idea for a business. And that you might actually qualify. You might need a mentor now.
In a few years, I will qualify.
Well, but tell us your idea for the business.
Idea,
we have a couple hundred mentors here.
Good.
And your wife is here.
Yeah,
so
my wife doesn't like the name, and she's probably right as usual. But it's basically kind of an auditing thing. When I was in the company, one day I was signing checks, and there was a check with an invoice okay to pay, attached, and it was to White Pages. And I looked at it, and I called the manager, and I said, you know, what is this? I don't understand. He said, well, I thought it was a phone book. Well, I don't know, 40 years later, I thought, wait a minute, somebody ought to be testing this and stopping these cheaters that are giving us all these phony bills. So we started a company, Dave Casiopo, who was here, I don't know if he's still here, he's a hemper, who has a digital marketing agency. It's called phonyinvoices.com. We sign up the company, they allow us to send them and test their payables department with a lot of standard stuff like, you know, the Yellow Pages, the Courier, the trademark, the domain name, but also what we found in our research was that Condé Nast had paid a $7.9 million phony printing bill, that Best Buy had paid a $900,000 phony merchandise bill. So we can take the name of a supplier, and that's how they got away with it at Condé Nast. They just twisted this printer's name a little bit. Somebody looked and looked okay, and they paid it. And by the way, it was on the internet. It wasn't even a paper bill. And you know, you think, well, we're airtight, we're fine. Now, we got a couple of problems. One problem is till people hurt, they won't basically buy the service. We're fine. We don't pay this junk. Yeah, well, you don't know what you don't know. The other problem's really interesting. There's CFOs who like it because it checks. But there's some CFOs, one that even paid the bill. They didn't want to go further with the service, and they thought it made them look bad, I guess. Yeah. So it's a very interesting political thing, and Charlie Wheeler has taken great interest in it. We've had lunch twice this week, and you know, we think there's great opportunity in government. We think people have cut payrolls, people are under pressure. We think there's great budgets are being cut. Every place you can pick up money. We think governments, school districts, businesses can pick up money. All they have to do is tighten up and know what they're paying. But anyway, it's a lot of fun for me, and well, I'll be a hemper in 3 years.
I didn't think this was a, you know, as your mentor, I wasn't sure this was a great idea.
Nobody.
So I sent to your house, I sent an invoice for $220 worth of overdue books, and I got a check back for $300. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea.
Shirley, did you pay that? Shirley paid it. Shirley pays the bills. I don't pay the bills.
Well, you know, the hemp culture is clearly an extraordinary culture. You've heard the 4 stories of these great businesses, and there are a lot more if you read the book. Entrepreneurs plus Mentors equals Success. 22 convincing stories, and they are convincing stories. And you know, I'd like to end this part of the program, and I think we can open this up to questions from the audience for all the panelists and for Barnett. But I'd like to say this. Though phonyinvoices.com may not be the greatest name, I think I'm on Shirley's side about this.
Everybody is.
Yeah, right. I want to say this about Barnett and Shirley Helzberg, that they're the 2 least phony people in this town. They have both been, through the company and through the various things that they've done for the community, incredibly successful, and their goal always and obviously for the rest of us is to give back to the city that they've loved. And I think that we could all give Barnett and Shirley an I Am Loved button, because you are loved by your city. Thank you very much.
Okay.